Hey, chiropractors, welcome to Modern Chiropractic Mastery with your host, Dr. Kevin Christie, where we discuss the latest in marketing, business, and professional growth with some of the leading experts in the industry. Welcome to another episode. Excited to have John Williams join us today, and he is a certified coach from the Great Game of Business, and a little bit of background on that. You'll hear it during the episode, but I'll give you some context. There's a book called The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack, and it's been instrumental in some of the mentors I've had and people we've had come speak to our mastermind group and uh, webinars we've done. And it's just a phenomenal way to have your business run. And there's certain principles to it. And we dive into the framework today. And I'm excited to have John. He's going to be kind of our headliner in New Orleans at the end of the year. What we've done with our mastermind group is we have an East group and we have a West group. We meet 3 weekends a year for the East only, and then 3 weekends a year for the West only. And then we combine the two groups for a fourth meeting. So there's 7 meetings total. It used to be 8 and 4 and 4. So now we do 3 and 3, and then we meet together at the end of October. And this year in 2025, we'll be in New Orleans, and 2026 will be in Dallas. But we're all squared away this year for the mastermind, but put it in your calendar for 2026. I'll be promoting that in the summer, but John will be joining us in New Orleans and diving into the details of Great Game of Business and how that works to really get your team enrolled in the idea of growing the business and making a game out of it. And he dives into that today. It's a phenomenal framework. He's very knowledgeable in different businesses. He's got quite a background with dentists, which is very applicable to the chiropractic profession. You're going to get a lot out of today and some of the wisdom that John has. So without further ado, here is my interview with John Williams. All right. Excited to have John Williams on the podcast today. We're going to dive into the Great Game of Business and that body of work. But before we do, John, tell us a little bit about yourself professionally.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. My name is John Williams. I am a certified Great Game of Business coach, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But my background, I have around 35 years of manufacturing and distribution experience. I started off as a frontline employee working in maintenance years ago and slowly got into leadership. And then in January of 2006, I was reading the newspaper, as most people did back then, which they don't do very much now, not anymore. But just reading through the classifieds, I was currently working for an aerospace company in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I see this little block ad that said wanted leadership, fast-growing company, and normally you don't pay attention to those type of ads if they don't give up too much information. But for some reason, I emailed my resume in, and 2 or 3 months later, January 30th, 2006, I was sitting in northwest Arkansas in a little town called Lowell, Arkansas, which is just south of Bentonville, as Central States Manufacturing. And that was my introduction to the Great Game of Business. Central States manufactured metal building components, steel roofing, pre-engineered metal buildings. They're an employee-owned company. But I can remember it very vividly, and I wrote a blog in 2020 about that first day at work in 2006 called How a Book Report Changed My Life. So I sit there my first day ready to fill out all my paperwork and all of that, go over my benefits. And the lady that hired me, she was the VP of Ops at the time. She came in and I said, okay, what do I do? Here's my driver's license. Here's my Social Security. She said, don't worry about any of that right now. I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to read this book. I want you to write a book report on it. And in 2 weeks, I want you to give a presentation to management about what this book means to you. And that book was The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. And that was my first introduction. And even in that blog, I put the copy of the book report in that blog. So, uh, so that was my first introduction to the great game of business. It was my first introduction to employee ownership, not just an ESOP, but also an ownership mindset and an ownership culture.
Mhm.
Central States was formed in 1988, and they built their entire business model off of two books. One was Good to Great, and the other was The Great Game of Business. They had been practicing the Great Game of Business uh, since, probably around 1992 when the book came out. Even before there was this great game of business coaching and consulting firm and all of the things that great game of business is today. But uh, the owner at the time just felt that the concepts fit in with an ownership culture, which was what he was trying uh, to implement in the business,
Mhm.
to go along with the other book of Good to Great. So
Yeah, and that's how I came across Great Game of Business was through the book, and it was actually from Dr. Ray Tuck, who was on my podcast
yeah.
maybe 3 years ago or so, and then, the first thing this was when we were just chatting, to prep for his call, and he said, "You gotta get this book." So I got the book, read the book, and then, we had a great episode, and then he was kind enough to come speak to our mastermind group in January of 2023 on he's a chiropractor, had 11 clinics. Unfortunately has passed away since, but
Mhm.
still the clinics are operating fully, because he implemented this structure and framework. And he talked a lot about how it helped him grow and scale his chiropractic practices during the mastermind group, which you're going to be speaking at our New Orleans group here in 2025, which is exciting. We're going to have the East and the West groups converge together in New Orleans, and we'll be diving into this in detail. But that was my first experience with it was through Dr. Tuck and in reading the book and just kind of diving into it. And I was like, you know what, this really makes a lot of sense. And so I want to dive into kind of the framework for it, and I'm just gonna set the tone a little bit and have you kind of dive into each a bit. But you come up with a critical number, and that is a confluence of what you call think, act, and feel. Could you dive into? Would it make sense to start with the critical number, or maybe like dive into think first?
It would probably be it would probably be best just to look at the model of great game of business, or
Hmm.
what are you trying to accomplish? What does the end goal look like?
Okay.
Because when I talk to people about it, they've read the book and they said, okay, well, how do I implement this? How do I do this? What's the critical number? What's the stake in the outcome? All of this. And I said, well, let's understand what you're trying to accomplish, because all of those little pieces that I just mentioned are tools uh, to help you get to this point to where you want to be as a great game of business company, or as a company that's going to implement great game of business principles, better yet.
Yeah.
So really the great game of business, it's really a system or a process that teaches employees how to think, act, and feel like owners.
Hmm.
And it does it in the concept, and it's very important uh, that you share information first, that you're transparent with information. Because if you're going to teach employees the business, okay, they have to have the data. They have to know the score. They have to know what the score means, where it comes from. So this whole thinking like an owner part is the teaching them about the business. Be transparent with the information. And when I say be transparent, you don't have to be transparent with everything. For example, salaries and wages. My opinion, you should never uh, share salaries and wages with others. There are certain entities or businesses where some of the work they're doing is confidential. You're doing work for the government, or if you're in the healthcare industry, there's certain things that you can't share And that's fine. You don't have to share that. The only thing you need to share is so that the individual can connect with what they're doing every single day with the outcome of the company. Like, how do they influence that? So things like, if you're looking at it from financials, from a P&L perspective, uh, you could just share the revenue, and you could share the cost of goods sold, and that may include direct labor, material, uh, and then, the revenue minus the COGS equals your gross profit. And then you have overhead. Gross profit minus overhead, uh, that's your profit, right? Before taxes. So it can be that simple. At least they can see and understand where those numbers come from. How do I affect them as an individual? And is the company winning or losing against a target? Okay. So that's part of the thinking part.
Yeah, and one question on that, I agree with you about sharing individuals' salary compensations. Could you give like maybe this is the total payroll of the company? So you're not actually
Sure.
like teasing it out, but they can see like, oh yeah, payroll's a lot more when you talk about taxes and overall payroll costs. They get the idea is like, wow, that's more than I thought. Because one of the things we see in chiropractic practices, it's a very intimate setting typically, right? You're
Yep.
talking 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 employees, and you got an owner chiropractor who's not necessarily totally business savvy. And then you got an associate, and there tends to be a associate chiropractor. There tends to be a disconnect, and a lot of times the associate doctor thinks the owner doctor's making so much money they have to bury it under
Mhm.
their mattress, right? And because they just may see what's coming in, the checks, the revenue, the batch reports, but then they have no idea with the overhead. And that's a big problem I see is many associates don't understand how much it costs to really run a practice that can actually afford a second doctor.
Yep.
And then on the flip of that, the owners don't do a good job of teaching the doctor, like, look, this is where we're at on what it takes to operate this, and I think that's a big issue. So you could share overall payroll, what you're
Sure,
saying.
and you would even in small businesses, and especially service type businesses, whether you're in the medical field, whether you're a chiropractor, whether you're a doctor, you have a dental practice, whatever that is, they're pretty much structured the same from a business standpoint. So you may want to put a salaries and wages line and include everything in there. And maybe you include healthcare and their benefits and their vacation and whatever as one total line. Now, if you're a small practice with one location or two locations, maybe the owner or the doctor that owns the company, maybe they're below the line or below the profit before tax because most of the employees aren't influencing that number. Sometimes that's done because uh, that amount is usually a big portion of that
Mhm.
total if you just have a few people. But yeah, you could put it all together because they do need to see that because in service type industries, salaries and wages are by far the biggest line item and the biggest influencer of profitability. Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so the think part of that is kind of know and teach the rules and really give them a lot of clarity on business. It sounds like, which is rare.
Yeah. Yeah. And financial literacy. And it doesn't have to be difficult. You're not trying to make them accountants.
Yeah.
You're just trying to get them to a level of where they can understand how
Mm,
they're impacting it. And it can be as simple as what I just explained.
yeah.
It's easier said than done because for years and years and years, business owners
Mhm.
have kept this information from employees. And because I think a lot of it is for control,
Mm,
you know, some of it is for fear, uh, and then they use excuses to support those fears, right? Like,
yeah.
oh, if my employees, I don't want them to see how much money I make, and then they'll want more money.
Mm,
Well, No, that's not true because most employees think owners of businesses are making a whole lot more money than what they actually are.
Yeah.
So I tell owners, what are you scared of? Why don't you just tell them the truth? Because it's much less than what they already think. If you don't tell them the truth, they're going to make up something and it's going to be based on perception. So that's one of the fears that you'll hear. So,
And yeah, and another thing is the idea of profit. Another person that we've done some work with is Greg Crabtree, who is an accountant, and I think he's got a pretty good background with the great game of business. And he talks about, your profit margin. He's a big proponent of the owner paying themselves what you should pay yourselves, right? So if you're an owner chiropractor, you would want to pay yourselves what the going rate of a full-time chiropractor would be to replace
mhm,
yourself. And so
sure.
then you add that into your overhead, obviously, and then he talks about having at least 15% profit after all that. Obviously, the more the better, but you want to be at that 15% profit. And just some for my audience, some chiropractors make the mistake of saying, "Oh, it's like no, your price should be 50% profit." Well, they're actually they're not counting what they pay themselves, right?
That's right.
And that's a big difference I want to tease out for chiropractors. So let's say we get that 15%. Then the other thing that Greg Crabtree talks about is then, even when you get that 15% profit, even if it's even if it's a big number, let's just say it's 10,000 in a month, which isn't a big number, but let's just say for sake of argument, your employees may think you're just taking all that profit home and they don't
Mhm,
realize that Uncle Sam's gonna take, I think he says to put 40% towards that, give or take, and that
mhm,
might you may not need all that, but that's gone. And then taking another 30% and reinvesting in the business, because that's the other part that I think employees don't realize is that all those things you need to buy and maybe implement a new marketing strategy and all the different things to reinvest to grow the business, that's coming from profit typically. And then you get to take the owner takes the 30% per se. So I think even breaking that down for team members can be very helpful to realize, like, look, even when we're profitable, it doesn't mean all this is just cash that I get to take home, right?
it is, and that's an important part in teaching the employees the financial literacy of a business, 'cause they 'cause the P&L, and profitability has nothing to do with cash flow,
Yeah.
because you can be profitable for a long time. If you run out of cash, you have no business.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's teaching them that. And, the way the Great Game of Business came about and why it was called Great Game is Jack Stack thought, I can't when he started SRC in 1983, he was trying to teach the employees financial literacy about business, and they couldn't grasp it. So we had to find something that they already knew that was just like a business. And
Mhm.
everybody understands the concepts of a game. It has
Yep.
rules, it has winners and losers, it has an objective. You keep score. You know if you're winning or losing, and all of that. Everybody understood that, and he related that to business. And I think when you teach financials, it's the same way. If you come at it from a business approach, most people are just going to shut down because they already have a preconceived notion it's too hard.
Mhm.
But if you teach them that a business P&L is no different than your personal P&L. Like I get gross pay, I have these deductions, which are personal cost of goods sold, then I have my take home pay, which is my personal gross profit, and then I have rent, gas, all this other
Oh,
stuff, which are
yeah.
my expenses, and that's my take home.
Mhm.
And then you ask them, how hard is it for you to make money as an individual? What do you put in your pocket at the end of the day?
Yeah.
It's just like that in a
That's
business.
that's
And
a
the
great
cash,
comparison. Thank you. That's a great comparison.
yeah, and the cash is your checkbook.
Yeah.
What do you have in your checking account? That's your cash flow. And you can have a lot of cash in there, especially if you have a wealthy uncle who's giving you money all the time and not have any money left over from your personal P&L from working. And
It,
you can
it,
still pay your bills.
it- yeah, it reminds me of It's a quote from West Gape, and it's volume is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality, right?
Yeah, it
And
is.
to your point on your QuickBooks may read X on the profit, but what does your operating account read, right?
Yeah, and in the medical services, businesses, it's about collections,
Yeah.
right? That's the cash coming in. That's what, you pay employees with, that's what you pay the bills, that's what keeps the door open.
Let's take a break from today's episode and announce our first sponsor. This is going to be Propel Marketing and Design. I've known Darcy Sullivan for years. We've worked hand in hand on my websites. I don't trust anybody else to do this search engine optimization. She does a great job. There's so much to it. A lot of the lingo and the words are beyond my comprehension, but it's just amazing work that she does. And if you're really going to get results with Google, you have to make sure your website is SEO optimized. And I really don't want you doing it yourself as a chiropractor. So you just have to have this type of stuff done. And if you're looking to get more organic online traffic that pulls in new patients, Propel Marketing and Design is currently offering chiropractors who listen to this podcast a free SEO website review. The free review will help you uncover methods that will improve your website and boost your search engine visibility. Head over to propelyourcompany.com/chiropractor and schedule your free SEO website review. You won't regret it. She gets great results. Your website needs this. Your search results need this. Head on over there to propelyourcompany.com/chiropractor to get your free SEO website review. So the second part is called act, and it's
Mhm.
follow the action and keep score. Or what are some of the details of that?
Sure, the acting like an owner. So you've taught them all about the business, financial literacy. You've taught them who their competitors are, who their suppliers are. You've taught them about their industry and their market and all of that. But it doesn't stop there. So now they have the knowledge. Now you have to let them be part of the business, include them in decisions. I coached about 5 or 6 dental practices over the past year and
Hmm.
implemented Great Game of Business. And here's the example I give on acting like an owner. So imagine this scenario that if you're a dental practice and you want to buy a new x-ray machine, and the owner goes out and buys the x-ray machine, brings it to the office and plops it right in there and said, "Okay, x-ray technicians, here you go. I bought you a new x-ray machine." Or imagine doing it this way. You meet with everybody that's going to use it and say, "Okay, all of you know our x-ray machine is old and we've had issues with it. Okay. Uh, Here are 3 different types of x-ray machines. I would like for you to give me your opinion on what you think we need. Now realize here's our budget.
Hmm.
Okay. And also, after you give me that, they're having a industry trade show next week here in town that they're going to be displaying these models, and I'd like for all of us to go look at it. Give me your feedback. They give their feedback. Maybe the owner goes with it, maybe he doesn't. But now when the x-ray machine comes up, they're already bought in.
Hmm.
They're part of the process. If something goes wrong or if it doesn't start in that first example, well, nobody asked me what to get, and they're going to blame the owner on why it's not running right. But if they do it the other way, they're bought in. They're more inclined to find out why it's not working and get it working.
Let's take a short break for one of our great sponsors, TrackStat. It is a new type of software plugin for your EHR that combines patient communication, marketing, automation, and statistics with patient and employee tracking. Built by chiropractors for chiropractors, it shows your team what to focus on each day. See patient visit habits, missing information, unpaid bills, insurance collection visit average, and more. Great visibility of data so you can focus on filling your office with your best patients. When you can see what your staff and patients are doing or not doing and take action accordingly, your profits naturally grow. Take TrackStat for a test drive in your office with our free trial. Not a techie, no problem. We can help. To get started on your free trial, visit trackstat.org and watch the demo. That is trackstat.org. Keeping score, is that just like, monitoring certain KPIs, some leading indicators, things like that?
Sure, every well, it's embedded in every human that they want to win,
Mhm.
okay? But they need to know what the target is, and that target is a critical number. That's the one number, the most important number in the organization that everybody is rowing to. Now, there's individual KPIs at the departmental level that those are drivers that affect that critical number. Okay. But yes, and so that's the target. That's the objective. But you have to constantly be updated on where you're at. So imagine this. So, and whether or not anybody's a Kansas City Chief fan or not, I'm going to use Patrick Mahomes as an example.
Mm.
So imagine Patrick Mahomes and the other 10 players on offense show up on the field, ready to run a play, and Patrick Mahomes is the only one that knows the play. The other 10 players on offense don't know what the play is. What's going to happen? A lot of, well, somebody may think they know the play, but they don't. Somebody's just going to sit there. Nobody told me to play. Patrick Mahomes is going to get killed. I mean, he's going to be out of the game, hurt. They're going to, so all of these things could happen. So now let's say we fix that and all 11 players know the play, but there's no scoreboard. They
Mhm.
don't know what down it is. There's no down marker. There's no play clock. There's no yard, field markers, nothing. What would happen then? And most people would say nothing. I said, would anybody come to watch the game or watch it on TV? No. Every game that's played in the world keeps score,
Mm.
and it has winners or losers, from checkers to chess to ping pong to football. It doesn't matter what you're playing, because most people would say, well, that would be crazy to not
Mm.
keep score and not know who's winning or losing at any point in time. Then my reply to them is, well, why are so many businesses in the world ran that way,
Mm.
where there's only one person that knows the play and only one person that knows the score, and everybody is either sitting there or making up something that they think they need to be doing. So it's
Yeah.
very, very important.
I love that. Makes a lot of sense. And that leads us into feel, which is provide a stake in the outcome. Can you dive into that for a minute?
Sure, a stake in the outcome. Most people see this as just a bonus or something, and that's
Mm.
part of it.
Mm.
Uh, but it can be a lot of things, and it's very much up to the individual on what they perceive as a reward or a stake in the outcome for the job that they've done.
Mhm.
Now, that can definitely be your regular pay, whatever that is. Uh, but it also can be more of, it can be a benevolent cause where you're doing something good for the community, or in the medical field, you're making people healthier. And, or it can be, you know, y- your grandpa and your dad and your uncle were all chiropractors. So I love the industry. But it could be your healthcare. It could be, the people I work with, the person, my leader, my manager. It can be all of these things. But the number one thing that I think that feeling part is having purpose at work, and all of those things I listed fall into that. But if somebody can go to work and they feel like they have purpose, they feel like they're making a difference as an individual, then they're going to feel better about that. And they're not going just to be concerned about pay and benefits and healthcare and all that. All that stuff's important. It is. But what ties them to that and what's going to motivate them uh, to do the best job possible is to have that purpose. And that's the feeling like an owner part. Now, the bonus part, it needs to, the incentives need to match their frame of reference when it comes to time.
Mhm.
So what I mean by that is if you're managing the office, your frame of reference on time may be, okay, what do I get done this week?
Mhm.
What do I get done this month? Where the frontline employee is, what have I got to do today? What have I got to get done? What's in my little world right now that I have to do? So the closer you can tie those incentives to their time frame, the more impact they'll have because that's the way they think. So bonus programs, a lot of great game of business companies that use these principles, they may set up an annual bonus that's paid quarterly.
Okay. Mhm.
So the annual incentive will be based on your critical number, whatever that is as a company. But you're paying a little bit of it quarterly to keep them engaged and keep them thinking about it because the shorter term thinkers. Okay. It's still an annual bonus. It's paid on a year to date basis, but you're giving pieces of that bonus if they accomplish some quarterly targets along the way. So
Gotcha. So you
that's an
set the
example.
quarterly target, get the quarterly bonus, but it ultimately adds up in summation to a yearly bonus.
Sure. Sure. So you could miss all first 3 quarter bonuses, but hit the year end and you get all of it, right? So it's
Yeah.
not one of these lose it. So let's just say if you have 10 offices
Mhm.
and you're the CEO of all of these chiropractor offices, then maybe their stake in the outcome should be something 3 to 5 years. Maybe it could be based on the value of the company, or maybe it's uh, based on a return on investment or return on assets or something like that. So you have a longer term incentive out there to make them think more about the sustainability of the business
Mhm.
and not so much focused on giving them a bonus every quarter. Right.
Yep. And you mentioned something briefly, ESOP. Could you tell us what that is exactly?
Sure. And ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan.
Okay.
This is where a lot of owners of businesses in several different industries, they're facing a a huge challenge now to where, 50, 60 years ago, it was passed on to the family, right? And
Mm.
then the family took over the business and they ran it for years. Well, what's been happening over the last 30 or 40 years is no one in the family is taking over that business, you know?
Mhm.
One of that, I think, is just there's more options out there. There's more things to think about, more things to do. Uh, I don't think families are having as many kids as they used to.
Mhm.
So that lowers the odds to them taking over the business. So one of those succession plans is to sell their company to the employees. You can sell it private equity, or you can sell it to the employees. The it is a defined deferred plan, so it falls under ERISA and the benefits. So what you actually do, you would sell your business to the ESOP, which is really a trust, if you look at
Mhm.
it from a legal perspective. And it has a trustee that oversees that trust. So inside that trust is the owners of the business, which are the employees.
Mhm.
Okay. So the ESOP purchases the company from the seller, uh, and over a period of time, every single year, a contribution is made into each one of the employees' accounts, uh, and that is put in their account, and it relates to so many shares
Mhm.
of stock in the company. Okay.
Nice. So yeah, so you could have under that kind of having a stake in the outcome. It could be an ESOP. That's probably a little bit of a bigger company, maybe.
Yeah.
Obviously, it could be benefits and paid quarterly, like how you talked about that. I mean, and then I've even seen some, and we're working through this as well. Is maybe a profit share with some key
Yep.
employees, right?
Yep.
Are you seeing that a lot in this model?
Yeah, you can. Like I said, if it with some key employees, you may look at some medium term incentives,
Mhm.
and maybe they're not just profit sharing, but they're based on some key metrics that you want that you want to look at to drive your business. Okay.
Yeah.
But so for example, SRC, which is the parent company of Great Game of Business, they'll do the short-term incentives like the annual bonus paid quarterly. Now, with some management director and executive levels, they may have a medium term business or bonus 3 years or so. And then there's the long term bit of equity in the company through an ESOP.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay. So you have a short term, medium term, and long
In the
term.
long term. Oh, I love it. Let's take a short break from today's episode to tell you about the best decision I've made in my clinic in the last 10 years. And that has been adding shockwave therapy to our clinic. The outcomes have been really impressive. Certain conditions we were struggling with in the past, we're now seeing results with the shockwave therapy for that. And second of all, the ROI has been really good. You know, when you make a big investment in something, you want to see a return. And we're seeing that return in clinical outcomes and in our investment, and that's been really nice to see. I chose Keenest Medical for 4 reasons. One is the technology is top notch. You have to have great technology. There's a lot out there that isn't quite up to snuff. The second thing is they have a really good clinical training. They have an exclusive partnership with Academy of Shockwave Excellence so that you can become clinically proficient in shockwave. You do need to get skilled at it. I think that's a big differentiator between practices that are getting great results and seeing the ROI is they have a great clinical aspect to that as well. So you want to get trained appropriately. Third is they have in-house service team for all of your technical support, which is key when you're investing in a machine like this. And then lastly, they have a very in-depth marketing and business support for you so that you can launch this into your practice effectively, that you can get that ROI on it, that you can get the clinical outcomes. And they also have really good financing options if you need that. So go to kinasmedical.com, KINAS medical.com, mention MCM podcast and receive a free shockwave in practice book with a purchase of a unit. So that's kinasmedical.com, KINAS medical.com, and mention MCM podcast. And then those 3 things, think, feel, and act, like we just broke down, that becomes a critical number. So I assume that's one number, and what are some examples of what that could be?
Well, it is one number. And I get this question all the time. Well, we're trying to do three things. And I said, well, here's the problem with that. And and I understand that all three are important.
Mhm.
But the problem is when you pick three critical numbers, people are going to go with the path of least resistance, the one
Okay.
that's easiest to get. Okay.
Mhm.
So two of them may be very hard. So they're going to do the easy one first. Well, the easy one may not have as much impact as the other two. So that's why it's important to get to that one number that is the most important number to the company over the next 12 months.
Gotcha.
So that number in 2020 when COVID uh, was here, a lot of those critical numbers changed from a profitability number to a cash number
Mhm.
because they wasn't worried about profit. They were just looking to survive. So maybe their critical number was revolved around more of a balance sheet item, whether that was cash, cash flow, DSO, whatever that is, collections,
Mhm.
and in the medical field. So, but most of the critical numbers you see are based around profitability. You do see the ones that have been doing this for a while. Look at other things like return on assets. If you're heavy on manufacturing where you have a lot of equipment and you're going to have a lot of depreciation, you're going to have a lot of inventory, uh, you know, that makes sense there. And then some people over the last 5 years, they've been looking at employee retention because it is so hard to hire people. Uh, so instead of just hiring all the time, focus on retaining the ones that you do have.
Yeah.
And so I've seen that number a little bit, but most of the time it's a profitability. It's around net operating income or profit before tax or those types of things.
Now, is that a percentage or usually an absolute number they try to go for?
It's usually it depends. I think for a lot of businesses that are just starting out doing this, they want to do something that the employees can understand and they can relate to, and they can tie how what they do as an individual into the outcome of the company. And usually that's simple profitability number.
Mm,
So it's going to be your net income or your profit before tax. As you start to mature, then, margins become more of a measurement tool. So whether that's the gross margin or whether that's net margin,
mm,
uh, you know, they'll start to look at that, and that because, that's going to take out the effect of revenue.
mhm. Now,
So there's
that'll be
yeah.
exciting to work through when we have you at our mastermind to kind of get really clear on that. In the dental industry and in the dentist office you've worked on, has it been anything other than profit for them? Has it been collections? Has it been new patients? Has it been anything in particular?
Well, it for the most part, I would say most all of them use collections,
Yeah.
and they're paying monthly incentives and stuff like that for collections.
Mhm.
Collections is fine.
Mm.
But in a dental practice, most of the dentists are, they're being paid at a variable rate. So they're
Yeah.
being paid for the procedures, not a base pay. So that's fine. That's going to go up and down with the collections or the revenue generated. But the staff is the largest overhead number
Yeah.
in a lot of those places. So when you just do it on collections, you don't take into account the cost, and you could be paying some incentives, paying a bonus, think you're doing great, and your net operating income is negative, and you start to have cash flow issues and all of this. Yep.
And that's what is interesting. That was one thing we learned from Dr. Tuck in our mastermind a couple years ago was the problem of bonusing on collections. And historically, a lot of chiropractors will bonus, and I ran into this in the past, but they'll bonus the associate doctor on what they bring in, right? What they
Mhm.
collect. And the thing that just doesn't measure is your costs of running a business going up, which obviously we've seen over the last few years, and that could be a staggering number versus obviously profit and net profit and things like that. That's
Yeah,
actual money that's there that's that takes into consideration the cost of stuff going up. So
sure, and I've seen it happen in dental practices where if the doctor is being paid or bonused on collections,
mhm.
the way they can do more is if they have more staff. So hire me 2 more assistants or 1 more assistants, and meanwhile, the profitability of the practice keeps going down, 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 and their collections going up, 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 and they're like, "Hey, what's going on here?
Yeah.
What's happening?"
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, and I've been diving into it quite a bit, and obviously starting with the book, and that's why I wanted to have you guys come speak to us to continue to really lock it in because it's a lot, and that's what. But once you figure it out, it really makes a lot like makes a lot of sense. It provides more clarity for yourself as the owner, and also your team members, and then
Mhm.
you just get on the same page and. I'm excited to keep on diving into this stuff.
Yeah, and you have this, uh, variability of scaling a
Mhm.
medical practice business, whether it's chiropractor, uh, especially in the dental practice, where, oh, you grow your business, you've got maximum profitability with the market you have, the staff you have, the dentist you have, and then you want to go hire another dentist. What happens when you hire that dentist? But it goes down.
Yeah.
And that dentist has to produce a certain amount to get it back up
Mm.
because that new dentist requires more staff and so on. So you're up, down like this. So dentists have to say, okay, well, I guess if I just stay at this level right here,
Mm.
and some choose to do, because every time I go hire somebody, my profitability goes down. So,
Yeah, and that goes back to what you talked about as far as educating everybody around it. And we see it all the time where, and Greg Crabtree did tell us, like, okay, yeah, 15% profit margin is ideal, but you can go down to 10% or so if you do bring on a new doctor or something
mhm,
that's a big investment. And then like being able to show that to that new doctor and say, hey, look, like we're taking a considerable hit on profit by hiring because there's always an onboarding and ramping up of that doctor and building their book of business. And obviously you hope that that happens sooner than later. But if that ramping up takes too long, it can really be a practice killer. And I'm sure there's a lot of variables to figure out what a normal how many months does it take for that
yep,
doctor to pay for themselves and get your profit back. And then obviously they need to be a profit center, right? You don't
yep,
hire just for fun. And so
that's right.
and but I think if you lay that out and that'll spur that doctor along to realize like they got to take ownership of this and they got to start doing things to build a practice. Otherwise, they're gonna because you know, I think a lot of times the new doctor coming on board and oftentimes they look at themselves as an asset to the practice, right?
Mhm,
And at some point, that's what you hope they are. But in the early phases of that, they're not an asset to the practice just yet. They're
no,
really a liability. And the sooner they can turn from liability to asset and do the right things that happen, the better everybody's going to be. And I think that's a big sticking point in our profession.
yep. And I think what these principles of great game of business is think, acting, and feel, what it does do is it teaches, especially in the medical practice, and it did this with the dental practices, to be more efficient with your staff, to use systems and processes instead of adding people to
Yeah.
to get something done. Uh, and that way, when you do hire that doctor, it doesn't require extra staff because there's systems and process. Because it's the way a doctor becomes fully utilized and the most efficient has everything to do with scheduling.
Mhm.
And in the dental practice, I start off by telling them, I said, all of you are important, but I'm going to tell you who the most important person is in the entire office. It's the person that patient first sees when they walk in the door. The person sitting at that desk who's doing scheduling, that's the first person they see. They have a smile on their face. Don't underestimate how important scheduling is.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
it's
and so
huge.
so that changes their mindset, and that allows them to do more with less staff or the same amount of staff that they had. Because the staff, yes, their support, you couldn't do it without them, but you're paying them whether you have 0 patients
Mhm.
or 20 patients that day. So
Which
that's the
is
issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the company, the Scheduling Institute. They work with mostly dentists and some chiropractors, but their whole thing starts training the front desk, and they have a particular bonus
Mhm.
system I won't dive into today, but it's based on new patients for the front desk. That's like the critical number for the front desk person, because psychologically, they actually spoke at our mastermind as well, and they said during it psychologically, if you don't have an incentive around the new patient or the scheduling, they like new patients is extra work for that front desk person.
Yep.
It's more paperwork, it's insurance verifications, it's all this stuff. And if there's no benefit to them or they don't see the benefit to them, then they may not be that excited to get that patient on or smile that, or when John's checking out and says, I need to get my son in here, isn't that eager to get the son on the schedule. Right. And so there's a lot of, like you said, the front desk is a gatekeeper
Mhm.
in a lot of ways and getting that schedule busy.
Yeah. Well, another thing that we found in the dental practice was tracking the hygienist, time per teeth
Mhm.
cleaning, time per visit. And some of them, I remember an example where they were taking like 60 or 65 minutes. And the process of actually cleaning the teeth was only about 20. And so, well, what are they done for? Well, they're checking them in, they're going through their paper. So, why is a hygienist doing that? The hygienist is a producer. Get that done before they come to the office or somehow, and that way you can be more efficient. So, these examples and these principles but you're teaching all of these employees how what they do impacts the business.
Yeah.
And
And then ultimately that critical number. Well, John, this has been great, and obviously it won't be the last time we speak. We'll see you in I believe it's October in New Orleans for our
sure.
East meets West mastermind, and we'll be really diving into this stuff. And I know as a group we're excited. But if any of our audience wants to reach out, how can they find you?
Sure. Well, you can certainly email me at johnwilliams@elucidateresources.com, or you can check me out on LinkedIn. Just search for John Williams Elucidate Resources, and you can pull me up there. And all my contact information is there. Feel free to reach out to me, email me, whatever you want to. So,
Perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes so everybody has that. Well, John, I appreciate your time today. Have a great
okay.
rest of the day.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you want to make the shift from busy, broke, and broken to time-free and cash confident, or you just want to continue with the exponential growth, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com. Look at the MCM Mastery tab, watch the short video on there, and check out what we are doing now for evidence-informed chiropractors. We are equal parts coaching and marketing done for you. Yes, you shoot some videos, we help you with campaign strategies and ideas and really become a thought leader in your community. You shoot those videos, you send them to us, we produce, edit, and brand them to you. Then we distribute them through all of your channels. We also take them and we turn it into one good blog per month. And every other month, we have Darcy Sullivan producing a robust blog with a topic that you pick from her database to help with your SEO. So we essentially become your content marketing agency to make sure your practice is always having ethical, elegant content marketing to help grow your practice. On the coaching side, we also help you with everything from marketing ideas to business, communications, finances, anything practice growth, and really try to help prevent you from being stuck on that island. And we hold you accountable. We have a great group of doctors that are just doing amazing things, and we look forward to help you out to take that next step in your practice. So again, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com and learn more.